Abitibi Pulp and Paper Mill and world-famous caviar were once the economic drivers of jobs and development in Sturgeon Falls, located in northeastern Ontario. The predominantly French-speaking community in West Nipissing is also known for a precedent-setting fight for a French high school in the 1970s. And in the latest installment of TVO's documentary series, Crossroads, Beyond Boom and Bust, we learn about this community's rich French language heritage and how Sturgeon Falls is evolving and working to keep its young people in the area. So, joining us now for more on this, James Hyslop. He is executive producer of Crossroads, Beyond Boom and Bust, and Michel Gervais, a resident of Sturgeon Falls, Ontario. And it's great to have you two in those chairs. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, James, what was it about Sturgeon Falls that you thought would make for a great episode of this documentary?
So the thesis of our series is what happens to a small town when the reason it exists no longer exists. And sadly, and sometimes wonderfully, Ontario has a lot of small towns that fit that bill. Sturgeon Falls was unique in the sense that, like many of the small towns, it started with a mill or a transportation hub or a factory that time or technology had eclipsed. And in Sturgeon Falls' case, the mill and then the caviar. When those two mainstays of employment went away, rather than either turning it into a ghost town or trying to reinvent themselves in a similar incarnation of what they were, the town pivoted significantly and became a center for embracing their French language rights and the French language culture.
Which is about 60% of the people who live there.
60%. And then not only that, a lot of the small towns we deal with, people, as soon as they become 16, they say, I'm out of here, I'm going to the big city. And the inverse is happening in Sturgeon Falls, where people are either staying or going away and then coming back. So the town actually has growth versus decline. In a lot of the small towns, it's how do you manage the shrinking of the small town and then the absence of services and resources for the community. And Sturgeon Falls reinvented itself in a number of different ways. And one of the big ways was Franco-Ontarian culture. And then, of course, being very inclusive and with the queer culture.
We're going to get to that in a second, but just refresh my memory here. I think it was 2002 when the mill disappeared?
Correct.
Is that right? 2002? Right. Okay. And the caviar industry, and now, it's gone.
It's gone, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Michel, tell us about your French heritage in Sturgeon Falls.
Yeah, my family's been here in Sturgeon Falls for as long as, probably since the turn of the 1900s, I would say. So virtually everyone in my family speaks French, and probably so my grandfather, Dr. Michel Gervais, was one of the 3 Francophone school board members during the education crisis. And my other grandfather as well, Gaetan Seri, was also really involved in a lot of the activism and
you're born there?
And I was born there.
Born and raised?
Born and raised, Sturgeon
and
Falls.
Still there?
Still there. I left for about 5 years to Toronto, and then I came back. But
What drew you back?
Pardon me?
What drew you back?
What drew me back? Honestly, a pandemic helped, but also just being home, speaking French again. Being in the city, it was nice. I loved it, but I was noticing myself kind of struggling more with my French, and that was something that I never thought would happen. And because it's so important to me to really be speaking my language with my family, with my friends, coming back really was an opportunity to kind of just re-familiarize myself with my language. And
that's a theme that the documentary keeps coming back to, because there is okay, first things first. Sturgeon Falls is as Francophone a community as it is because of a really neat story about a priest from many years ago. You want to tell that story?
No.
Paparazzi.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Paparazzi. So he would travel to Europe and would kind of, mythologize the North, especially West Nipissing, and kind of invite the families to come to places like Verner to get it, some land and to develop farming and things like that. And so that convinced a lot of people, and then winter happened, and but
I gathered then when the jobs disappeared, the Anglophones left, but the Francophones stayed.
Exactly, the poor Francophone people, they couldn't afford to leave, so they stayed, and that's over time just what kind of grew the French community in those areas.
Okay, you touched on this business about a French high school and the efforts. It's more than 50 years ago right now to get a French high. There was an elementary school, but not a high school. And go ahead, Sheldon, bring up the photo from that time, because these were serious protests. Nous voulons notre école. We want our school, as opposed to the English school, right?
I think one of the things that some of the feedback we get, particularly in the stories we do that have Franco-Ontarian communities, is I think it's an underserved and underrepresented group. I mean, when we think of French culture in Canada, we immediately think of Quebec, and then maybe l'Acadie. But the Franco-Ontarian culture... Acadia.
There we go, yep.
We forget that there's a very substantial and thriving French culture in Ontario, the Franco-Ontarian. And I think, what happened in Sturgeon Falls was a turning point for recognition and acceptance as a culture and a language and a way of living that needed to be embraced rather than shunned or even worse, just completely ignored.
And there is a kind of there's a deep concern among the Francophone population there that it's up to us. It's our responsibility to hang on to
exactly. Who
that
else is going to do
culture.
it? We're here. We want, we are a majority in population, and we just want to be able to exist in our language and speaking, what we're comfortable speaking.
Exactly. You come from a very political family, I have learned.
I do.
Okay,
Yes.
You want to go through a bit of a list of some of the people who've gone into public life in your family?
Yeah, so I have my grandfather, Gaétan Serré, who was MP from 1968 to 72. My uncle, Marc Serré, my mom's brother, who, was MP from 2015 to this year. And I have
He's still the MP there, right?
no longer.
Oh, did it?
No.
Did he lose in the last election?
Yeah.
No kidding, I
Yeah.
missed that. Okay.
And
He was nickel belt, I think, wasn't he?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
And my grandfather as well. And then I have my great uncle, Ben Serré, who was provincial MP for Timiskaming and Cochrane.
I remember him.
in the
He was
late
an
90s.
MPP.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So, okay, I'm going to ask the obvious question. It's obviously in the DNA of the family for you guys to go into politics. You thinking about it?
No. I would say not in government politics necessarily, but I'm part of the West Nipissing Pride Committee. I was president for 3 years. Now I just stepped down as vice president. But activism is really important to me, and especially for queer rights, rural queer rights, and even more niche, Francophone rural queer rights. I think it's really my people. So that's really who I advocate for.
Gotcha. We've talked about how many of the jobs have disappeared, and therefore you would assume, like so many communities in Canada, the population goes down. The biggest export is youth, right? Young people leave. How has the community actually grown in recent years?
Well, I think in a couple ways. It's by embracing the French culture and making it a place that they want to stay. People want to live there because they can live, speak, and socialize in their native tongue. And secondly, I think one of the other things is like for example, since we've finished filming the documentary, the plant has been turned into is going to be turned into a very vibrant community center. So it's about making the community an attractive place and embracing all cultures, being very inclusive, the very prominent queer community, and supporting lifestyles that you would normally disassociate with small town thinking.
That's what I was wondering, Michel, because we are a few subway stops away from one of the largest, most active, most prominent gay communities in the whole country, right down at Church and Wellesley in Toronto. This is a long way from Church and Wellesley.
Yeah.
So how does this work?
I have a few friends that have moved here to Sturgeon Falls a couple of years ago who are queer. I've met them in Sturgeon Falls, but they saw West Nipissing Pride when they were looking for where to move to, and they were like, "Oh, well, this small town has some queer, life and some acceptance."
But it's not Church and Wellesley. I mean, that's a real beehive of
activity.
activity.
I think not everyone necessarily wants that kind of like vibrant queer nightlife experience, and they just want to be able to live somewhere quiet and calm that has, a sort of community that can at least make them feel safe.
But also, is it fair to say that it's also fully integrated into the community? It's not been ghettoized. It hasn't been.
No, exactly. So it's definitely
part of the community. Is an integral part of the community versus this is, it's not been ghettoized or fragmentized.
So you feel at home there?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, it helps that I've been there my whole life, and the community knows me personally. But it seems to me that even people that come here later are able to integrate and get to know the community and still feel at home.
Is homophobia an issue?
I would say yes, of course, a little bit. Especially, the past year or two, there's been a bit more pushback than when we started. But I think they're just cowardly enough to stay home and just be behind their keyboards. So I'm gonna just, be happy with that.
Let's show a clip here from this doc. That's very funny. Let's show, Crossroads boom and bust, Sturgeon Falls resident Riley Restool talking about why she stayed in the area. Sheldon, if you would.
I had always said in high school, like, I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. And I think a lot of my friends shared the same sentiment. And now that we're all getting older, people seem to want to come back. That's what happened to me, and that's what a lot of my friends are doing as well. My family's here, and my community is really close. I chose to come back because of the work that I'm hoping to do in the future. I want to work for First Nations communities in the North. I want to work for rural communities in the North, and I don't think I can do that work if I don't live in the North.
What's interesting about Sturgeon is that they're not identically sized, but you've got a big chunk of Francophone people, got a big chunk of Anglophone people, and you've got a big chunk of Indigenous people. Mm-hmm. Based on what you learned shooting this, how well do they all get along?
I think for the most part, I think it's a little bit of can be an example of how different cultures, different views on life can all come together and respect each other's differences and embrace those differences to try and build a stronger, more resilient community. And I think resilience is an important word, because without resilience, a lot of these small towns that don't have some of the features or attractions of a large center, it's the resilience of getting through, as you said, the cold winters, the distances. And so it's a little bit of not just necessity, but it's practicality, where these people, where the people in these communities come together, and it's, you just saw Indigenous culture, French culture, Anglo culture, all live relatively harmoniously. I mean, it's the thing I think is wonderful is, the two competing Poutine trucks on either side of the street. I mean, and that's, they're both the best. They both attract a different and same crowd on the same day. But I think it's that it's a great emblem of the competitive nature inside of a community, but it's done with respect and a lot of fun.
Should we show him doing his thing? Okay, we're going to show you doing your thing. Here we go. Sheldon, next clip, if you would.
Comment ça va, Sturgeon Falls? I love you all so much. On va continuer le show. Give it up for me. My name is Je ne sais pas.
There's this misconception that small town is small mind. In small towns, only small-minded people exist. And there's definitely some. But what I've been noticing is people are open and ready to accept new ideas, new people.
Et dans ma jeunesse, j'aurais jamais pensé qu'on aurait eu un espace créatif tellement acceptant de les gens et leur identité, et d'avoir un espace qui est juste vraiment développé pour les jeunes et par les jeunes aussi. C'est ça qui est vraiment important, c'est que les jeunes, faut vraiment qu'ils croient qu'ils ont une voix dans notre communauté.
I like that, incidentally, about the documentary. Go back and forth between our two official languages in this country, and you see very little of that, actually. So good for you for doing that. Okay, I got to ask you about your drag name. Je ne sais pas.
Yeah.
As in French for I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Je ne sais pas. Where'd you get that from?
Honestly, I had just turned 18. I was on a walk with my little sister, and I was coming up with funny drag names. And that was one of them, I guess, at some point, because I didn't know what to come up with. And a year later, I was in Toronto, wishing to make my little drag debut. And I went in that little notes app note, and I found the name, and it's been the case since. But for me, not knowing is kind of like a philosophy of life. We don't have all the answers. We don't know, as humans, we don't know anything really, essentially. And that's okay. And you know what I mean? So that's kind of the essence of my name.
There will be people who will watch this documentary, and they will say to themselves, okay, a drag show in downtown Toronto, downtown Ottawa, whatever, I get that. Sturgeon Falls, Ontario, they've got drag queen shows like that?
We do.
It's going to be shocking to a lot of people.
You know what? Yes.
But I think the thing that is shocking is that it's absolutely not shocking to the people of Sturgeon Falls. And I think that dichotomy of it, you don't expect it in a small town in Ontario where it is just part of the community fabric. And I think that's one of the reasons we chose Sturgeon Falls as one of the subjects in the documentary series, because what would, as you said, would be shocking really is not in Sturgeon Falls.
I think
Sorry, go ahead.
To me, I just, when I moved back, I didn't want to compromise. I didn't want to have to let go of my drag or let go of my, language or my queerness. I just wanted to throw on a drag show like I would here. So I did, and it went well, and then we just kept doing more and more and more, and now I do shows in Sudbury and all over the north, Hearst even, and I'm just able to do my drag in Northern Ontario in French and English. I love to do bilingual shows, and I'm happy to say I didn't have to compromise that part of me.
How much did you know about Sturgeon Falls before doing this?
Caviar.
That's it. That's funny. Yeah, the people who made us, the woman who made us up today, put the makeup on us. I asked her the same question. That's what she said too. Caviar. That was it.
Yeah.
So not very much.
Very little.
What would you say is sort of the most interesting nugget you've learned about Sturgeon Falls, having now put this documentary together?
That it's a showcase of how different cultures, different backgrounds, different communities can come together, live in relative harmony with respect and friendship. And I think, as our research team went more and more and deeper into the story, it became a no-brainer for us that this was a community that, again, goes back to answer the thesis of our series: what happens to a small town when the reason it exists doesn't exist?
Yep.
And with the mill and the caviar disappearing, there would be no reason for this town to exist had not the community come together and embrace the different cultures and communities inside of their own community. And I think for us, that's a great story to tell.
You want people to watch this thing?
I really do.
Well, then I'm going to have to tell them when they can.
Give us a plug.
Here we go. Crossroads, Boom and Bust, Sturgeon Falls, airs on TVO Wednesday, June 25th, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. You can stream it anytime on our website, tvo.org, or on TVO Today's YouTube channel. Gentlemen, thank you for the visit here at TVO, and safe back to Sturgeon Falls for you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Enchanté.
C'est rien.